quote-unquote metal panel. I'm Fulya Çelikel. I hail from Istanbul, and right now I don't have an institutional affiliation. I'm the so-called independent scholar, which is something of a rarity in musicology from what I collect from our congregation. I'm not gazing with envy to all those very nice affiliations. I'm just trying to maybe make us try to understand what really the responsibility of a musicologist is. I'm very sorry I couldn't be at two places at once. In our next panel, actually, the next door panel in this morning, it was discussed what can a musicologist do? Is it out of love that we are here, out of love of music that we have pursued this very demanding, very difficult discipline? So my presentation from a self-centric view, unfortunately, since I'm sort of a niche in between academia and the business world at the moment, and I don't have access to a fully fledged academic library anymore, is trying to shed light on what can an academic do outside academia. Is it possible for a musicologist to pursue a career outside academia? So let's start with what gives the paper its title. You must have heard of Bruno Netto. So he's not a historical musicologist, he comes from the breed of ethnomusicologists, he called it a breed. So actually he likens historical musicologists who really held very strong sway during the 1960s and 70s in especially Anglo-Saxon academia, in Anglo-speaking Anglophone academia, as the lions, that they have their territory, they're very defendant of their territory, they work with well-defined methodologies, they hail from well, maybe diverse backgrounds, but they have to have the literacy, they have to have the literature which is connected to their discipline, and therefore can resonate with, for example, writings that come all the way from the 19th century and beyond. So the way paid by Guido Adler or Adorno is their way, in a matter of speaking. And then come the ethnomusicologists, the younger breed, the cheetahs. They had to first be more adaptable. They had less funding, they had less territory in the university domains, and what they had stronger than historical musicologists is their lack of canonization, actually. They didn't need their superheroes to exist somehow, their superheroes being the voices of the peoples themselves that they study. So it is maybe a more ethnographically connected way of trying to understand music in its social and cultural context. But does music need yet another new breed of musicologists? So that was discussed, of course, during the 90s. These two factions vying throughout 70s and 80s brought around another streaming, as we know, the new musicology movement. So from an epistemological standpoint, it's for amending the weaknesses of both disciplines, maybe bring a little bit more structure into ethnomusicology and bringing a little bit more flexibility into historical musicology or music history, if you like. So where do we stand at this moment? Where are we in academia? What are we? And that's what I was proposing, especially judging from our experience as metal music scholars. We are neither lions nor cheetahs. We feel like, at least I feel like, a domestic cat. I'm much more humble and small in my occupation of academic territory, but I'm more flexible. Still, I can move around many different places. I'm a much more tech-savvy person, for example, than most of the musicologists I met. And how do we therefore find a way to redefine this occupation of musicology? So it's not new musicology per se. Is there maybe a post-musicology in this discussion somewhere? That's what I want to find out about through the case of metal music studies. So, well, I am a metal scholar. So I do have degrees on music theory. I have a degree on composition with a piano minor from my university in Ankara. Then I studied piano performance and pedagogy as a tweede phase study in the Netherlands, which is more performance-oriented actually. Then I studied historical musicology, and my focus was actually narrative piano pieces of early 19th century. So what is it to do with metal? Well, not much, honestly. And then it's followed by an ethnomusicology program, PhD, because there is no historical musicology program in Turkey, basically, that I could pursue. I was actually accepted to Eastman School of Music's program, but due to family affairs, I decided to get married and have a family. I didn't go there. I don't resent the decision, but I had the chance to meet wonderful people like Ralph Locke. You must know him. He even thanked me in one of his prefaces to his recent publication back then, because I happened to show him some augmented second, you know. Yeah, this is you're laughing because maybe for people who are not so theory savvy, if you're studying Orientalism in music, it's sort of a holy grail for you. So anyways, I had to go through an ethnomusicology program, and then consequently, my own university didn't have a place for me to function as an assistant or something, so I was recruited by another university to teach students from diverse backgrounds, it's a music appreciation course basically, that I gave for 15 years. 15 years, 3 terms a year. I taught them major works of Western music, major works of opera, what else? Genres and styles in Western music. So these are engineering majors who are just trying to survive through their cultural course requirements. So therefore, it was always a very disconnected career, if you like, and this is my stage persona. The instrument I have is a guitar. I don't know if anybody is familiar with that. It's my battle axe that I love brandishing on the stage. So there is also the Dr. Synth lady who is performing on stage, headbanging and everything, disconnected from all this stuff. Maybe that's part of the reason I have never been really at home fully in academia. But from an epistemological standpoint, actually, is there any scholar who can say, I'm purely an ethnomusicologist today? Is it just possible? So we do have, of course, we're discussing about this transdisciplinarity, we're discussing about all this postmodern mingling of disciplines. So we do have systematic musicology, we do have cognitive musicology, who do study more brain than music, honestly. And I've even met people who say, okay, we are analytical musicologists, but they don't really analyze music, they analyze our cultural and intellectual response to it for the most part. So, and new musicologists' most strong statement, of course, says, okay, we have finally people who are outside the canon have a say, we deal with cultural studies, we deal with the voice of the minorities, not only the dead white male European canon sort of discourse. So we do have all this, but where does it lead us? At this point, is it really possible to become a lion or cheetah, or are we all cats? Are lions and cheetahs also reduced to cat size? So that's the sort of thing I would like to find out about. Are we losing focus as academics? So whereas metal music studies come in all this, we have representatives from every discipline basically. I have met metal scholars who have no musical background at all. They come from very diverse disciplines. I've met sound engineers and cultural studies people, religious studies people, antiquity scholars. They're a very devoted bunch, and what connects them together is not being music majors, but loving the music. So being the consumer of that particular music, which actually is a very interesting sort of fraternity. So it's a framework, an academic framework that brings together people through love. Weird as it sounds, now there is the board which has been founded in 2008, I think, right? 2007, 2008, so it's recognized as an academic discipline. Unfortunately now we are everywhere around the world. There is only 1 or 2 university locales, if you like, that we can really speak about, that have major metal music studies disciplines, I should say, or a number of students. One is Huddersfield University, for example. And we do have a peer-reviewed journal. There is all kinds of the habitual competition going on, you know, blind reviews and everything. And then we have biannual conferences twice, in 2 years, every 2 years. Actually, last time due to COVID, one conference had to be shifted. So we actually held conference in 2022, 2023, and the next one will be next year in Sevilla, Spain. If anybody wants to show up, we would be very happy. So this is my discussion actually, as we have already collected. So we are always facing budget cuts. 2 out of 3 talks in even this conference talk about how difficult it is nowadays to justify musicology in a world where wars are waging, in a world where the climate is changing. How relevant can we, how can we convince? There's always the pressure of convincing. Consequently, will we have a Charles Rosen or a Karl Dahlhaus this time? Is it just possible? Or was their world a more stable world where they could be of seminal importance? Was it possible to have superstardom back then? Is it maybe connected to the idea we will never have a star in the magnitude of Madonna? It was being discussed maybe in a conference 2-3 years ago, but now we have Taylor Swift who's sort of really blocking out Dublin in 2 nights consecutively. So maybe that discussion should also be reconsidered. But really, is it the milieu change that makes our discipline so slippery, or was it always so? But then, is the redemption we seek, is the justification we need to have called new musicology? So the contemporary cultural and social issues are, of course, coming into our discussion. And we do have a growing focus on underrepresented groups, but is it enough to save the day and to justify our presence in academia? But the worst case scenario is, of course, what can a musicologist do out of academia? That I had to experience in the past 2 years actually, not because I couldn't find academic work, but I had to have a government funding for founding up a startup, and they required I would have no other affiliations. So this means, of course, if you ever looked at how you would set up a company and try to survive, there is a deep, huge valley called the Valley of Death. This is no narrative, it's really called the Valley of Death. That's the time when you start up your company and now you have to survive till your debt equals your income. That might take, in general, about 2 years. So in 2 years' time, you have to try all this. By academic support, I mean revising others' papers. By journalism, I mean writing maybe concert reports, reviews, journal articles, all kinds of non-academic writing. Teaching, of course, it will be overqualifying to try to find yourself a job outside academia, or maybe what you can consider doing. What we musicologists are particularly good is, of course, we're somewhere in between performance and academia by the very nature of our research. So we are good people on the stage, so this might also be considered as a stage. So no matter what you would like to, what you have to teach, you would be good at it if you can really master the knowledge in the sense of your own discipline. So that I also had to try. And for social work, there are actually so many initiatives available. So many, for example, EU funds, so many community improvement projects. We never really try to look outside academia for a means to survive, but that I also tried, so that's also a very justifiable way of performing out in your profession, in your chosen occupation in life. So how did I survive? Basically is I set up a startup company and I'm teaching. This is a screenshot from what I built. I'm making a platform for kids to understand how music works. In, for example, Britain, this is a much more easy thing to do because even the BBC has very good programs. They have hands-on programs, small bite-sized things. There's a lot of material on television, but in Turkey we have very little. State television doesn't have much of an educational program, basically, and the state schools are very crowded, especially with the influx of immigrants from the Middle East at the moment. Therefore, if you want to really teach a new generation music, you should try to find more innovative ways. This is what I'm building, is a web-based platform. So it's being coded basically using .NET language, and I'm creating the content. It's all about teaching how music works, music notation, ear training. This is possible through interactive exercises. Music teaching at this level doesn't work with video. Video only engages the visual cortex of the brain. It just flows from the kid. It doesn't stay. You have to really force knowledge, in a matter of speaking, into the motor cortex. And by clicking, this is far better than just watching. Of course, to drive it home, to make it really fully up to its potential, you need an instrument, which is not always possible in the climate of Turkey. So that's what I'm trying to do. That's what I'm trying to push all my skills. Yes, again, disconnected from what I study, which is metal music, and what musicology does. So you have listened to my little narrative of belonging and not belonging. So I would be very happy if you were to connect me. This is my company's address, and drsimplay.com is my personal little website, and I would be happy to also connect through the social media. I wanted to introduce you our discipline, metal music studies, and what we offer as domestic cats. Can you shift the lion into 6 domestic cats? We will see in time. So thank you for listening. Maybe we first finish up our panel, and now we can discuss together if this analogy holds. Actually, as the musicologist, I didn't know my friends here. It falls to me to answer this question. The thing is, if you want to study a musical culture, I think I would concur that the hands-on method is the best. And musicology always has that distance. It has to really observe at first. You have to be the camera, not the film director, my instructor would tell me during my PhD studies, and that should be the general attitude, for the good or for the bad. And metal is just so inclusive in terms of forming its own community that it just doesn't let you maintain that distance. If you do, you're not metal, you're a poser. You're sort of outside the community. So I would say, at least from my experience, the best way to deal with metal is just to be a fan first and foremost, and then maybe apply the methods of your background into it to study. I found it to work the best. My thesis is actually on autodidact musicians, people who pick up guitars and learn by themselves. And to study them, the least thing you should do is just try to be a bossy academic who wants to sort of, I want to observe you just the way you would observe a bug under a microscope. So that's absolutely not the attitude. The way I could approach them was just to maintain that stage persona, to be one of them, to be a band member, to be sort of sometimes even ridiculed, because you will always have that outsider stance. For the metalheads, to be one of them is really, it's not a way of, and you can't convince them unless you are really one. So they would really tell you apart in that sense. So such methods such as practice-led research does work better in that sense. And thankfully musicology has expanded to include all of this. Actually, when I was beginning with my PhD in 2011, they did all they could, my jury did all they could to dissuade me from having such an approach. It was really marked as unacademic, and luckily I found some kindred spirits. Maybe you know Jasmine Shadrach from the US. She was at Northampton at that time, and she was the only person who did a similar thing. And we were always, of course, correlating, corresponding, comparing notes. Now it's a very common thing.
Is it, I'm sorry, the approach is that you're like a participant observer?
So that's the best thing you can be in terms of metal, I would say. So, of course, I'm not talking about the general, applicable to all cases approach. In my case, it worked really well.
Okay.
So maybe to add to that, there are a few musicologists working in metal studies, but most of them that I know, they do this musical anthropology approach. Like, it's not only looking at how does the music work, how does the sound work, it always has like a purpose to it, right? I mean, it's not maybe that interesting for me. Okay, if I read stuff, I'm not I am interested in how it works, but it's like, okay, but why? So this makes it heavy, for example, this makes it extreme or somewhere. That's always like the question you asked in metal studies. And to the second point of being a fan researcher, it is the majority, I think, of people in metal studies are also like fans, like we are, for example, but there are also a few who have come like more from popular music studies or yeah, from other fields and are just very interested in this music culture because it is kind of different, as I argued, not like in all ways, but it is interesting and succinct to look at it. So, but the majority are fans themselves, and yeah, we can debate over the benefits and disadvantages.
But I think a lot of music scholars are fans of the music that they do research on. I think it's actually the minority of people who deliberately choose a music that they don't like, or let's say studying music in National Socialism and assuming that they are not Nazis. So like there are cases like this, but I think in the majority of cases people choose their topics because they have some kind of affinity. Yeah, also in like when they study Western European art music, like classical music, maybe it's not embraced in that way openly, like you do. And I think this is particular to metal music studies. So I know some other people there, and then that it's like embraced. But of course, like the culture of classical concert music has a particular way of expressing your fandom that is looks a little bit different, but. I mean, you have a lot of these apologetic pieces, and then because there are a lot of horrible people and in all music scenes, and so I think it's a more general problem that we all have to face to some extent, like our emotional relationship to the topic that we do research on. I used to do, for example, research on Balkan exoticism in music, and I really hated it so much that I stopped doing research on it because I felt I cannot deal with this anymore.
The Balkan way of understanding polyphony is really totally different. It's building on dissonances. Correct me.
No. It was about exoticism, like the production of cliches of So that's my comment.
I had another question, which is again about this idea of building communities. And something that, I mean, sometimes when I think of like the good old days of musicology, which probably never really existed, but I suppose the idea that some of us might have is that in the past, maybe you had, obviously the musicology community was smaller probably, and also more homogeneous in all kinds of respects. So you might have, I don't know, someone who researches medieval music and someone who does 19th century music, and obviously it's different repertoires, but it's a similar approach, similar methods, similar values, similar kinds of questions. So I don't know, sometimes the sense I've had kind of research in the history of musicology is that there was a better kind of sense of like a shared ground, and I think obviously now musicology is expanding a lot. That's great, but sometimes I worry about losing that common ground because there are people who do well either musicology or music studies. I know it's not the same thing, but like sometimes I feel, well, I don't understand this person's research, and probably they don't understand mine, and you know, sometimes it's very difficult. I mean, we can of course all coexist, respect each other, but it's like, you know, there are parts of the discipline that I don't feel I really understand, you know, or I don't feel I really communicate with those parts of the discipline, and I'm sure it's kind of vice versa as well. So, and I suppose I was intrigued because you mentioned cats, and cats are also a very lonely animal. so it made me think maybe
function as a herd.
You know, maybe we are all cats as well, in the sense that maybe we are like more lonely in some respects. We might, I mean, like I don't know if cheetah, well, lions certainly they operate in groups, no, they're prides. I think cheetahs, I don't know. So maybe we've lost that thing as well. Maybe we've lost the sense of the group, the sense of the pride. But then obviously Joe's presentation is about how metal studies serves to construct a different kind of community. So I was wondering if you as a panel or individual, if you have any thoughts about community building for us as scholars. So do we have, do you feel do we feel we all need to have like dual or triple, quadruple allegiances to musicology, to metal studies to something else, or is it more like cats who kind of ally with someone if it suits them, but then they just, you know. So what are your thoughts?
First and foremost, we have to survive in academia, which really is a difficult thing. So my attitude is, of course, not mentioning like cats are lonely animals, they only collaborate as much as they need to. I never took it from that stance, actually. I only took it from how small and insignificant we are compared to figures like, say, Susan McClary. Is there anyone who haven't ever read her work here? But there are so many people. You didn't? Ah, really?
We're not musicologists.
No.
Okay, any musicologists would have done that. So that idea of reaching a broad community is what I find a little bit lacking and a little bit precarious. So that was what my analogy was built upon. But the community building, you see, what brings scholars in metal music studies together, what binds them together is somehow their own idea of fandom, their own focus point. Therefore, I think one of the most apt criticisms coming from Bruno Nettel's book that I built my presentation upon was that sometimes Nettel argues in some universities you see ethnomusicologists who are so much bound to their ethnographic background that their work really is an ethnomusicology work, no music in there, because if they're not mentioning, if they're not really taking over themselves the musicking approach, you know, Christopher Small, Key Mantelun, that sort of approach, you have to be part of the community by playing an instrument or something. If you're not that, what you write is basically an account, not per se on the music, but on the behavior and the community and the social aspects of the music, more than a musical analysis. Sometimes you don't even transcribe the music to do so. So that attitude is maybe also precarious, and in that sense I really love being part of the metal music studies community, because there the music is on the foreground. Maybe we don't do a Shakerian analysis of the music, but do we really need to? Joe has something to add to this, I guess.